In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy won't cease. For in these fairy tales, amidst the laughter and tears, the wolf finds his solace, he conquers his fears. As the night grows deeper, he serenades the moon with melodies that linger, a soft and soothing tune. In this sacred hour, where magic abounds, the fairy tale wolf writes love into sound. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. So if you hear a whisper beneath the silver skies, know it's the fairy tale wolf letting his heart rise.
Good evening. Congrats on getting first guilty. And thank you for coming in. So, how was the rest of your week then? I've been looking for more music. So. Apparently YouTube has an entire section of music that they won't tag you for copyright for if you use, so I've been rummaging through their listings. Dun, dun, dun. But it is Friday. Finally. Actually, test drove a car for someone to be passenger in, which, you know, is kind of weird. That's especially, they want the car, but they want to be able to know that someone else can drive it, so it drove pretty well. I just looked at a van I had been looking at. And, you know, no one came out to help me, so. Yeah. Yeah, right. Can't really think of much to talk about before the stories, so. See, this is part 6. Might have... No, the story's not. What gifts and pages that mean they've left? There are 7 stories left in this book. And I have absolutely no idea what to do after this. No. I've got a few ideas, but nothing written in stone. Because mankind has returned to etching in tablets. But let's go ahead and get over to the fairy tale screen. And ignore my cat bathing. She seems to find the most inappropriate times to do it while on camera. Arya! Okay, she's gonna ignore me. That's 9:05. I don't... Should I go ahead and start the stories? Or should I wait a couple more minutes to see if anyone else shows up to listen to stories? So I usually do try to wait until like 9:10 before I'd start. Let's see how many people are here. So. Oh well. We got 7 stories. We may or may not get it done tonight. Who knows? This is interesting. This story is from a French book, but it is about England. So a French story about England, translated by a Scotsman. Mm-hmm. The 4 Gifts. Hey, kiddo. Welcome in. Yeah, so the first story for tonight, The 4 Gifts. In the old land of Brittany, once called Cornwall, there lived a woman named Lilac Borges, Welcome in. We are reading fairy tales. Seven left in this book. Writing and reading streams have been fairly interesting. A lot of us used to list it on ASMR, and then I think we officially got the writing and reading category a little over a year ago. So a lot of us have moved over to it. We'll either be working online, writing stories, or we'll be narrating stories like I tend to do. Me, I really prefer folk tales. I like folk tales. I've done a couple of books of ghost stories. I've done some I've done some biographies. Listen, I much like folklore. Yes. Yesterday I was doing American folk tales, which are just ones that were collected. The collection is from 1944, but the stories go all the way back to 1812, I think. Oh, a little before that. But folk tales in the United States kind of got relabeled as tall tales instead of folk tales. But they're kind of the same thing. If you go to the first link that Kel posted, that is my story archive with well over 1,000 narrations I've done. Let's see, the Enderling Fairy Book series. Thank you for that, Drake. Well, you ever hear about the stories that people will tell about history, but you can't tell if they're true or not? Like yesterday, I read at least 4 or 5 stories about Davy Crockett. Whether they were true or not is up for debate. Folk tales are fairy tales that don't involve fairies, for the most part. The fairy tales typically just have morals. They're usually more about people, and we're more or less meant to teach lessons, whereas fairy tales are supposed to be more fancy. I did an entire video explaining what the different types were. But yeah, fairy tales and folklore, tall tales, legends, mythology, history. I just like old stories in general. I mean, I could say something that I believe my great-great-grandfather was hung for being a horse thief, but survived the hanging, so they couldn't retry him for it. So I have one relative who was supposed to die and survived, and then I've got another relative that faked his death and got arrested for tax evasion. But yeah, stories get there. Indian and indigenous. I have some books, I just haven't gotten into them yet. Indigenous, I've got some of those that are going to be in the American folklore. Like the Andrew Lang series are everywhere around the world. The American folklore is pretty much everywhere in North America. I've done some stories from Brazil. I don't think I've had any specifically from the Andes, though. I would have to search my books to see if I can invest in Inca. I have a couple I can see from where I'm sitting that are Aztec. I'd have to look a little bit closer to see if I have any Incan. I really need to reorganize my library. Yeah, Incan does have the Incas do have a very interesting culture. I think I might have. Again, I'd have to look at my books a little bit closer. Yeah, a lot of folk tales either got erased or, like the religion themselves, they got converted. Like this weekend. Like, how many different cultures celebrated Easter before it became a Christian holiday? All sorts of things like that. And said I'd have to double check through all my books to see if I have anything specifically for Incan. Yeah, American Gods is an interesting series. Neil Gaiman has some interesting writing. I think I have his book on Norse mythology right now. So it's not gonna go. Oh, have fun scrolling. As I said, there's a lot of us out there. So. Hopefully I'll see you around sometime. Let's see. Barbac. I think that's how it's supposed to be. No, it's barbaric. Mhm. Four gifts. In the old land of Brittany, once called Cornwall, there lived a woman named Barbac Bols, who spent all her days in looking after her farm with the help of her niece, Tiffany. Early and late, the two might be seen in the fields or in the dairy, milking cows, making butter, feeding fowls, working hard themselves and taking care that others worked too. Perhaps it might have been better for Barbac if she had left herself a little time to rest and to think about other things, for soon she grew to love money for its own sake, and only gave herself and Tiffany the food and clothes they absolutely needed. As for poor people, she positively hated them, and declared that such lazy creatures had no business in the world. Well, this being the sort of person Barbac was, it was easy to guess at her anger when one day she found Tiffany talking outside the cowhouse to young Dennis, who was nothing more than a day laborer from the village of Clover. Seizing her by the arm, she pulled her sharply away, exclaiming, "Are you not ashamed, girl, to waste your time over a man who is as poor as a rat, when there are a dozen more who could be only too happy to buy you rings of silver, if you would let them?" "Dennis is a good workman, as you well know," answered Tiffany, red with anger. "And he puts by money, too. Soon he will be able to take a farm for himself." "Nonsense!" cried Barbac. "He will never save enough for a farm till he's 100. I would sooner see you in your grave than a wife of a man who carries a whole fortune on his back." "What does fortune matter when one is young and strong?" asked Tiffany, but her aunt, amazed at her words, would hardly let her finish. "What does a fortune matter?" repeated Barbac in a shocked voice. Is it possible that you really are so foolish to despise money? If this is what you learned from Dennis, I forbid you to speak to him, and I will have him turned out of the farm if he dares to show his face here again. Now go and wash the clothes and spread them out to dry." Tiffany did not dare disobey, but with a heavy heart went down the path to the river. "She is harder than these rocks," the girl said to herself. "Yes, 1,000 times harder, for the rain can at last wear away the stone, but you might cry forever and she would never care. Talking to Dennis is the only pleasure I have, and if I am not to see him, I may as well enter a convent." Thinking these thoughts, she reached the bank and began to unfold a large packet of linen that had to be washed. The tap of a stick made her look up, and standing before her she saw a little old woman, whose face was a stranger to her. "Would you like to sit down and rest, Granny?" asked Tiffany, pushing aside her bundle. "The sky is all the roof you have. You rest where you will," replied the old woman in trembling tones. "Are you so lonely, then?" inquired Tiffany, full of pity. "Have you no friends who would welcome you to their houses?" The old woman shook her head. "They all died long, long ago," she answered, "and the only friends I have are the strangers with kind hearts." The girl did not speak for a moment, then held out a small loaf and some bacon intended for dinner. "Take this," said she. "Today, at any rate, you shall dine well." And the woman took it, gazing at Tiffany for a while. "Those who help others deserve to be helped," she answered. "Your eyes are still red because that miser Barbac has forbidden you to speak to the young man from Clover. But cheer up. You are a good girl, and I will give you something that will enable you to see him once every day." "You?" cried Tiffany, stupefied at discovering that the beggar knew all about her affairs. But the old woman did not hear her. take this long copper pin," she went on, "and every time you stick it in your dress, Mother Boris will be obliged to leave the house in order to go and count her cabbages. As long as a pin is in your dress, you will be free, and your aunt will not come back until you have put it in its case again." Then rising, she nodded to Tiffany and vanished. The girl stood where she was, as still as a stone. If it had not been for the pin in her hand, she would have thought she was dreaming. But by that token she knew it was no common old woman who had given it to her, but a fairy, wise in telling what would happen in the days to come. Then suddenly Tiffany's eyes fell upon the clothes, and, to make up for lost time, she began to wash them with great vigor. Next evening, at the moment when Dennis was accustomed to wait for her in the shadow of the cow-house, Tiffany stuck the pin in her dress, and at the same instant Barbaik took up her sabots, or wooden shoes, and went through the orchard and past the fields to the plot where her cabbages grew. With a heart as light as her footsteps, the girl ran from the house and spent her evening happily with Dennis, and so it was for many days after that. Then, at last, Tiffany began to notice something, and the something made her very sad. At first, Dennis seemed to find the horses that they were together fly as quickly as she did, but when he had taught her all the songs he knew, and told her all the plans he had made for growing rich and a great man, he had nothing more to say to her, for he, like many other people, were fond of talking himself, but not of listening to anyone else. Sometimes, indeed, he never came at all, and the next evening he would tell Tiffany that he had been forced to go into town on business. But though she never reproached him, she was not deceived, and saw plainly that he no longer cared for her as he used to. Day by day her heart grew heavier, and her cheeks paler, and one evening, when she had waited for him in vain, she put her water-pot on her shoulder and went slowly down to the spring. On the path in front of her stood the fairy who had given her the pin, and as she glanced at Tiffany, she gave her a mischievous laugh and said, "Why, my pretty maiden hardly looks happier than she did before, in spite of meeting her lover whenever she pleases." "He has grown tired of me," answered Tiffany with a trembling voice, "and he makes excuses to stay away. Oh, Granny dear, it is not enough to be able to see him. I must be able to amuse him and to keep him with me. He is so clever, you know. Help me be clever, too." "Is that what you want?" cried the old woman. "Well, take this feather and stick it in your hair, and you will be as wise as Solomon himself." Blushing with pleasure, Tiffany went home and stuck the feather into her blue ribbon, which her girls wear to parts of the country. In a moment she heard Dennis whistling gaily, and her aunt was safely counting her cabbages. She hurried out to meet him. The young man was struck dumb by her talk. There was nothing that she did not seem to know, and for songs she only could sing those from every part of Brittany, but could compose them herself. Was this really the quiet girl who had been so anxious to learn all he could teach her, or was it someone else? Perhaps she had gone suddenly mad, and there was an evil spirit inside her. But in any case, night after night he came back, only to find her growing wiser and wiser. Soon the neighbors whispered their surprise among themselves, for Tiffany had not been able to resist the pleasure of putting the feather in her hair for some of the people who despised her for her poor clothes, and many were jokes she made about them. Of course they heard of her jest and shook their heads, saying, "She is an ill-natured little cat, and the man that marries her will find that she is so will hold the reins and drive the horse." It was not long before Dennis began to agree with him, and as he had always liked to be master wherever he went, he became afraid of Tiffany's sharp tongue, and instead of laughing as before when she made fun of other people, he grew red and uncomfortable, thinking that his turn would come next. So matters went on till one evening Dennis told Tiffany that he really could not stay a moment, as he had promised to go to a dance that was to be held in the next village. Tiffany's face fell. She had worked hard all day and had been counting on a quiet hour with Dennis. She did her best to persuade him to remain with her, but he would not listen, and at last she grew very angry. "Oh, I know you're so anxious to miss the dance," said she. "Is it because of Usias of Pinathu who will be there?" No, Liz was the loveliest girl for miles around. She and Dennis had known each other from childhood. Yes, Liz will be there," answered Dennis, who was quite pleased to see her jealousy. "And naturally one will go a long way to watch her dance." "Go then!" cried Tiffany, and entering her house, she slammed the door behind her. Lonely and miserable, she sat down by the fire and stared into the red embers. Then, flinging the feather from her hair, she put her head in her hands and sobbed passionately. "What is the use of being clever when it is the beauty that men want? That is why I do have asked for it. It is too late. Dennis will never come back." "Since you wish it so much, you shall have beauty," said a voice at her side. And looking around, she beheld the old woman leaning on her stick. "Fasten this necklace around your neck, and as long as you wear it, you will be the most beautiful woman in the world," continued the fairy. With a shriek of joy, Tiffany took the necklace, and snapping the clasp, ran to the mirror which hung over the corner. This time she was not afraid of Liz or the other girl, for surely she could be as fair and white as she. And with the sight of her face, a thought came to her, and putting on hastily her best dress and her buckled shoes, she hurried off to the dance. On the way there, she met a beautiful carriage with a young man seated in it. "What a lovely maiden!" he exclaimed as Tiffany approached. "Why, there is not a girl in my own country that is to be compared to her. She and no other shall be my bride." The carriage was large and barred the narrow road, so Tiffany was forced, much against her will, to remain where she was. But she looked at the young man full in the face, and she answered, "Go away, noble lord, and let me go mine. I am only a poor peasant girl accustomed to milk and make hay and spin." "Peasant you may be, but I will make you a great lady," he said, taking her hand and trying to lead her to the carriage. "I don't want to be a great lady. I want to be the wife of Dennis," she replied, throwing off his hand and running to the ditch which divided the road from the cornfield, where she hoped to hide. Unluckily, the young man guessed what she was doing, and signed to his attendants, who seized her and put her back in the coach. The door was banged, and the horses whipped up to a gallop. At the end of an hour, they arrived at a splendid castle, and Tiffany, who would not move, was lifted out and carried into the hall, while a priest was sent for to perform the marriage ceremony. The young man tried to win a smile from her by telling her all the beautiful things she could do as his wife, but Tiffany did not listen to him, and looked about to see if there were any means by which she could escape. It did not seem easy. The 3 great doors were closely barred, and one through which she had entered was shut with a spring. But her feather was still in her hair, and by its aid she detected a crack in the wooden paneling, through which a streak of light could be dimly seen. Touching the copper pin which fastened her dress, the girl sent everyone in the hall to count cabbages, while she herself passed through the little door, not knowing where she was going. By the time night had fallen, and Tiffany was very tired, thankfully she found herself at the gate of a convent, and asked if she might stay there till morning. But the portress answered roughly that it was no place for beggars, and bade her to be gone. So the poor girl dragged herself slowly along the road, till a light and the bark of a dog told her she was near a farm. In front of the house was a group of people, 2 or 3 women and sons of a farmer. When their mother heard Tiffany's request to be given a bed, and a good wife's heart softened, and she was just going to invite her inside, one young men, whose heads were turned by the girl's beauty, began to quarrel as to which should do her the most for. In words they came to blows, and the women, frightened at the disturbance, pelted Tiffany with insulting names. She quickly ran down the nearest path, hoping to escape them in the darkness of the trees, but in an instant she heard the footsteps behind her. Wild with fear, her legs trembled under her, when suddenly she bethought herself of the necklace. With a violent effort she burst the clap and flung it around the neck of a pig which was grunting in a ditch, and she did so hearing the footsteps cease from pursuing her, and run after the pig, before her turn vanished. On she went, scarcely knowing where she was going, till she found herself, to her surprise and joy, close to her aunt's house. For several days she felt so tired and unhappy that she could hardly get through her work, and to make matters worse, Dennis scarcely ever came near her. "He was too busy," he said. "Really, it was only rich people who could afford to waste time in talking." As the days went on, Tiffany grew paler and paler, till everybody noticed it, except her aunt. The water pot was almost too heavy for her now, but morning and evening she carried it to the spring, though the effort to lift it to her shoulder was often too much for her. "How could I have been so foolish?" she whispered to herself when she went down usual at sunset. "It was not freedom to see Dennis that I should have asked for, for he was soon weary of me, nor a quick tongue, for he was afraid of it, nor beauty, for that brought me nothing but trouble. But riches make life easy for oneself and others. But when I dared to beg this gift from the fairy, I should be wiser than before, and I should know how to choose it better." "Be satisfied." Ah, cool. Hope it's good, though. But yeah, enjoy lurking. "Be satisfied," said the voice of the old woman, who seemed to be standing unseen at Tiffany's elbow. "If you look at your right-hand pocket, when you go home, you'll find a small box. Rub your eyes with the ointment it contains, and you will see that yourself contains a priceless treasure." Tiffany did not in the least understand what she meant, but ran back to the farm as fast as she could, and began to fumble joyfully in her right-hand pocket. Sure enough, there was a little box with the precious ointment. She was in the act of rubbing her eyes with it when Groac'h entered the room. Ever since she had been obliged to leave her work and pass her time, she did not know why, in counting the cabbages, everything had gone wrong, and she could not get the laborer to stay with her because of her bad temper. When therefore she saw her niece standing quietly before the mirror, Barbec spoke out. "So this is what you do when I'm out in the fields. It is no wonder that the farm is in ruin. Are you not ashamed, girl, to behave so?" Tiffany tried to stammer some excuse, but her aunt was half mad with rage, and a box on the ears was her only answer. At this Tiffany, hurt, bewildered, and excited, could control herself no longer, and turning away burst into tears. But what was her surprise when she saw that each teardrop was a round, shining pearl. Barbec, who also beheld this miracle, uttered a cry of astonishment, and threw herself on her knees to pick them up from the floor. She was still gathering them when the door opened, and in came Dennis. "Pearls? Are they really pearls?" he asked, falling to his knees also, and looking up at Tiffany, he perceived others still more beautiful rolling down the girl's cheeks. "Take care not to let any of the neighbors hear of it, Dennis," said Barbec. "Of course you shall have to stay your share, but nobody else will get a single one. Go on, my dear, cry on." She continued to Tiffany. "It is for your good as well as ours." And she held out her apron to catch them, and Dennis in his hat. But Tiffany could hardly bear any more. She felt half choked at the sight of their greediness, and wanted to rush from the hall, though Barbec caught her arm to prevent this, and said all sorts of tender words which she thought would make the girl weep more. Tiffany, with a violent effort, forced back her tears and wiped her eyes. "Is she finished already?" cried Barbec, in a tone of disappointment. "Oh, try again, my dear. Do you think it would do any good to beat her a little?" shouted the Dennis, who shook his head. That is enough for the first time. I will go into town and find the value of each pearl. Then I will go with you, said Barbeck, who never trusted anyone who was afraid of being cheated. So the two went out, leaving Tiffany behind them. She sat quite still on a chair, her hands clasped tightly together, as if she were forcing something back. Unless she raised her eyes, which had been fixed on the ground, and beheld the fairy standing in the dark corner by the hearth, observing her with a mocking look. The girl trembled and jumped up, and taking the feather, the pen, and the box, she held them out to the old woman. Here they are, all of them, she cried. They belong to you. Let me never see them again. But I have learned the lesson that they have taught me. Others may have riches, beauty, and wit, but as for me I desire nothing but be a poor peasant girl I always was, working hard for those she loves. Yes, you have learned your lesson, answered the fairy, and now you shall lead a peaceful life and marry the man you love, for after all, it was not yourself you thought of, but him. Never again did Tiffany see the old woman, but she forgave Dennis for sowing her tears, and in time he grew to be a good husband, who did his own share of the work. Okay, that was interesting. So, our next story for this fabulous Friday Night of Fairy Tales. The Groac'h of the Isle of Lok. In old times, when all kinds of wonderful things happened in Brittany, there lived in the village of Lannis a young man named Pogum, and a girl named Bella Postic. They were cousins, as their mothers were great friends, and constantly in and out of each other's house. They had often been laid in the same cradle, and had played and fought over their games. When they are grown, they will marry, said the mothers. But yet, as everyone was beginning to think of wedding bells, two mothers died, and the cousins, who had no money, went as servants in the same house. This was better than being parted, of course, but not so good as having a little cottage of their own, where they could do as they liked, and soon they might have been heard bewailing to each other at the hardness of their lots. If I could only manage to buy a cow and get a pig to fatten, grumbled Horn, I would rent a bit of ground for the master, and then we could be married. Yes, answered Bella with a deep sigh, but we live in such hard times, and at last fair the price of pigs had risen again. We shall have to long wait to it. That is quite clear, replied Horn, turning away to his work. Whenever they met, they repeated their grievances, and at length Horn's patience was exhausted. One morning he came to Bella and told her that he was going away to seek his fortune. The girl was very unhappy as she listened to this, and felt sorry that she had not tried to make the best of things. She implored Horns not to leave her, but he would listen to nothing. The birds, he said, continue flying until they reach the field of corn, and the bees do not stop unless they find a honey-giving flowers. And why should a man have less sense than they? Like them, I shall seek still until I get what I want, that is, money to buy a cow and a pig to fatten. If you love me, Bella, you won't attempt to hinder a plan which will hasten our marriage. The girl saw it was useless to say more, so she answered sadly. Oh, go then, since you must. But first I will divide with you all that my parents left me. And going to her room, she opened a small chest, and took from it a bell, a knife, and a little stick. This bell, she said, can be heard at any distance, however far, but it only rings to warn us that our friends are in great danger. The knife frees all that touches it from spells that have been laid on them, while the stick will carry you wherever you want to go. I will give you the knife to guard you against the enchantments of the wizard, and the bell to tell me of your perils. The stick I shall keep for myself, so that I can fly to you if you ever have need of me. Then they cried for a little on each other's necks, and Horan started for the mountains. But in those days, as in these, beggars abound, and through every village he passed they followed her in crowds, mistaking him for a gentleman because there were no holes in his clothes. There is no fortune to be made here, he thought to himself. It is a place for spending and not earning. I must see and go further. And he walked on to Pont Island, a pretty little town built on the bank of a river. He was sitting on a bench outside an inn when he heard two men who were loading their mules and talking about the Groac'h of the Isle of Lok. "What is a Groac'h?" he asked. "I have never come across one." And the men answered that it was a given name of a fairy who dwelt in the lake, and that she was rich. Oh, richer than all the kings in the world put together. Many had gone to the island to try and get possession of her treasures, but no one had ever come back. As he listened, his mind was made up. "I'll go too, and return too," he said to the muleteers. They stared at him in astonishment, and besought him not to be so mad and to throw away his life in such a foolish manner. He only laughed and answered that if they could tell him of any other way to purchase a cow and pig to fatten, he would think no more about it. But the men did not know how, But the men did not know how this was to be done, and shaking their heads over his obstinacy, left him to his fate. So Harn went down to the sea and found a boatman who engaged to take him to the Isle of Lok. The island was large, and lying almost across it was a lake, with a narrow opening to the sea. Harn paid the boatman and sent him away, and then proceeded to walk around the lake. At one end he perceived a small skiff, painted blue and shaped like a swan, lying under a clump of yellow broom. As far as he could see, the swan's head was tucked under its wing, and Hrund, who had never beheld a boat of such sort, went quickly towards it and stepped in, as to examine it better. But no sooner was he on board than the swan suddenly woke up. His head emerged from under his wing, and his feet began to move under the water, and in another moment they were in the middle of the lake. As soon as the young man had recovered from his surprise, he prepared to jump into the lake and swim to shore. But the bird had guessed his intentions and plunged beneath the water, carrying Harn with him to the place of the gallows, the palace of Groac'h. Now, unless you have been under water in the sea and beheld all the wonders that lie there, you have never have an idea of what Groac'h's palace was like. It was all made of shells, blue and green and pink and lilac and white, shading into each other till you could not tell where one color and the other began. The staircases were crystal, and every separate stair sang like a woodland bird as you put your foot on it. Around the palace were great gardens full of all the plants that grow in the sea, with diamonds for flowers. In the large hall, the Groac'h was lying on a couch of gold. The pink and white of her face reminded you of the shells of the palace, while her long black hair was intertwined with strings of coral, and her dress of green silk seemed formed out of the sea. At the sight of her, Hrund stopped, dazzled by her beauty. "Amen," said the Groac'h, rising to her feet. "Strangers and handsome youths are always welcome here. Do not be shy, but tell me how you found your way, and what you want." "My name is Horn," he answered. "Lanius is my home, and I am trying to earn enough money to buy a little cow and a pig to fatten." "Well, you can easily get that," she replied. "It is nothing to worry about. Come in and enjoy yourself." And she beckoned him to follow her into a second hall, whose floors and walls were formed of pearls, while down the sides were the tables laden with fruit and wines of all kinds. And as he ate and drank, the Groac'h talked to him, told him how the treasures he saw came from shipwrecked vessels, and were brought to her palace by a magic current of water. "I do not wonder," said Horn, who now felt quite at home. "I do not wonder that the people on earth have so much to say about you." "The rich are always envied." "For myself," he added, with a laugh, "I ask only for half your wealth." You can have it, if you will, Oren, answered the fairy. What do you mean? Cried he. My husband, Corandon, is dead, she replied, and if you wish it, I will marry you. The young man gazed at her in surprise. Could anyone so rich and really beautiful really wish to be his wife? He looked at her again, and Bella was forgotten as he answered. A man would be mad indeed to refuse such an offer. I can only accept it with joy. Then the sooner it is done, the better, said Groac'h, and gave orders to her servants. After that was finished, she begged Horan to accompany her to a fish pond at the bottom of the garden. Come, lawyer, come, miller, come, tailor, come, singer, cried she, and holding out a net of steel, and at each summons a fish appeared and jumped into the net. When it was full, she went into a large kitchen, threw them all into a golden pot. But above the boiling of the water, Horan seemed to hear the whispering of little voices. Who is it whispering in the golden pot, Groac'h? He inquired at last. It is nothing but the noise of wood sparkling, she answered, but it did not sound at least like that to Horan. There it is again, he said after a short pause. The water is getting hot, and it makes the fish jump, she replied. But soon the noise grew louder, and like cries. What is it? Asked Horan, beginning to feel uncomfortable. Just the crickets on the hearth, said she, and broke into a song which drowned out the cries from the pot. But though Horan held his peace, he was not as happy as before. Something seemed to have gone wrong, and then he suddenly remembered Bella. Is it possible I've forgotten her too? What a wretch I am, he thought to himself, and he remained apart and watched Groac'h while she emptied the fish into a plate, and bade him eat his dinner while she fetched wine from the cellar in a cave. Horan sat down and took out a knife which Bella had given him, but as soon as the blade touched the fish, the enchantment ceased, and 4 men stood before him. Horan, save us, we entreat you! Save yourself too! Murmured they, not daring to raise their voices. Why, it must have been you who I heard crying in the pot just now. Of course. Yes, it was us, he answered. Like you, we came to the Isle of Lok to seek our fortunes, and like you, we consented to marry the Groac'h. And no sooner was the ceremony over than she turned us into fishes, as she had done to all our forerunners, who are the fish pond still, where you will shortly join them. On hearing this, Horan leaped into the air, as if he felt ready himself frizzled in a golden pot. He rushed to the door, hoping in a way to escape, but the Groac'h, who had heard everything, met him on the threshold. Instantly she threw the steel net over his head, and the eyes of a little green frog peeped through the meshes. You shall go and play with the rest, she said, carrying him off to the fish pond. This very moment, Bella, who had been skimming the milk at the dairy farm, heard the fairy bell tinkle violently. As soon she grew pale, for she knew it meant that Horan was in danger, and hastily changing to the rough dress she wore for work, she left the farm with her magic stick in her hand. Her knees were trembling under her, but she ran as fast as she could across the crossroads, where she drove the stick into the ground, murmuring as she did as a child the verse her mother taught her. Little staff of apple tree, over the earth and over the sea, up in the air to guide me, everywhere to wander free. And immediately the stick became a little smart horse, with a rosette in each ear and a feather on its forehead. He stood very still while Bella scrambled up, and then he darted off, his pace going quicker and quicker, till at length the girl could hardly see the trees and the houses they flashed past. But rapid as the pace was, it was not rapid enough for Bella, who stopped and said, The swallow is left swift in the wind is left swift in lightning, but you, my horse, if you love me, must be swifter than them all, for there is a part of my heart that suffers, the best part of my heart is in danger. And the horse heard her, and galloped like a straw carried along by tempests till they reached the foot of a rock, called the Leap of the Deer. Then he stopped, for no horse or mule that was ever born could climb that rock, and Bella knew it. so she began to sing again. Horse of Leon given to me, over the earth and over the sea, up in the air be God to me, everywhere to wander free. And when she had finished, the horse's foreleg grew shorter and spread into wings. His hind wings became claws, feathers spread all over his body, and she sat on the back of a great bird, which bore her to the summit of the rock. Here she found a nest made of clay and lined with dried moss, and in the center a tiny man, black and wrinkled, who gave her a cry of surprise at the sight of Bella. "Ah! You are the pretty girl who wants come to save me!" "To save you?" repeated Bella. "But who are you, my little friend?" "I am the husband of the Groac'h of the Isle of Lok. It is owing to her that I am here." "But what are you doing here in this nest?" "I am sitting on 6 eggs of stone, and I shall be set free till they hatch." On hearing this, Bella began to laugh. "Poor little cock," said she, "and how am I to deliver you?" "By delivering Horin, who is in the power of Groac'h." "Ah, tell me how I can manage that, and if I have to walk around the whole of Brittany on bended knees, I will do it." "Well, first you must dress yourself as a young man, and then go and seek the Groac'h. When you have found her, you must contrive to get hold of the net of seal that hangs around her waist, and shut her up in it forever." "But where am I to find a young man's clothes?" asked she. "I will show you," he replied, and as he spoke he pulled out 3 of his red hairs and blew them away, muttering something a while. In a twinkling of an eye, the 4 hairs changed into 4 tailors, of whom the first carried cabbage, the second a pair of scissors, the third a needle, and the 4th an iron. Without wasting any orders, they sat down in the nest and, crossing their legs comfortably, began to prepare a suit of clothes for Bella. The one with the leaves of cabbage made her a coat, and another served for the waistcoat, but it took 2 for the wide breeches, which were then in fashion. The hat was cut from the heart of the cabbage, and a pair of shoes from the thick stem. And when Bella had put them all, you would have taken her for a gentleman dressed in green velvet, lined with white satin. She thanked the little men gratefully, and after a few more instructions, she jumped on the back of her great bird, and was borne away to the Isle of Lok. Once there, she bade him transform himself back into a stick, and with it in her hand she stepped into the blue boat, which conducted her to the Palace of the Shadows. The Groac'h seemed overjoyed to see her, and told her that never before had she seen such a handsome young man. Very soon she led her visitor to a great hall where wine and fruit were always waiting, and on the table lay the magic knife there where Hearn had, unseen by the Groac'h, left there by Hearn. Unseen by the Groac'h, Bella hid it in the pocket of her green coat, and then followed her hostess into the garden, and to the pond which contained the fish, and their sides shining with 1,000 different colors. "Oh, how beautiful creatures," she said. "I'm sure I should never be tired of watching them." And she sat down on the bank, with her elbows on her knees, and her chin in her hands, her eyes fixed on the fishes as they flashed past. "Would you not have liked to stay here always?" cried the Groac'h, and Bella answered that she desired nothing better. "Then you have to marry me," said the Groac'h. "Oh, don't say no. I have fallen deeply in love with you." "Well, I won't say no," replied Bella with a laugh, "but you must promise me first to let me catch all those lovely fish with your net." "It is not so easy as it looks," rejoined Groac'h, smiling. "But take it and try your luck." Bella took the net which Groac'h held out, and, turning rapidly, flung it over the witch's head. "Become and embody what you were in your soul," cried she. In an instant, the lovely fairy of the sea was a toad, horrible to look upon. She struggled hard to tear the net asunder, but it was no use. Bella only drew it tighter, and flinging the sorceress into a pit, she rolled a great stone across the mouth and left her. As she drew near the pond, she saw a great procession of fishes advancing to meet her, crying in hoarse tones, "This is our lord and master, who has saved us from the net of steel and the pot of gold." "And who will restore you to your proper shapes?" said Bella, drawing the knife from her pocket. But just as she was going to touch the formless fish, her eyes fell on a green frog on his knees beside her. his little paws crossed over his heart. Bella felt as if his fingers were tightening around her throat, but she managed to cry. "Is it you, my Orn? Is this you?"
"It is I!"
croaked Little Frog. And as the knife touched him, he was a man again. Springing up, he clasped her in his arms. "But we must not forget the others," she said at last, and began to transform the fishes back to their proper shapes. There were so many of them that it took a long time. Just as she had finished, there arrived a little dwarf from Deer's Leap, in a car drawn by 6 cough shapers, which had been the 6 stone eggs.
"Here I am!"
He exclaimed.
"You have broken the spell that held me, and now come to get your reward."
And dismounting from his chariot, he led them down to the caves filled with gold and jewels, and bade Bella and Orn take as much as they wanted. When their pockets are full, Bella ordered her stick to become a winged carriage, large enough to bear them, and all the men they rescued, back to Lenalis. There, they were married the next day, but instead of setting up housekeeping with a little cow and pig to fatten that they'd so long wished for, they were able to buy lands for miles around for themselves, gave each man who had been delivered from the Groac'h's small farm, where he lived happily to the end of his days. Okay, well, I had to use a pause on the ads, so now we will take them. I will see you all back in a few. guess the ads are over. The timer vanished. So I'm going to have to assume they're over. So it was 2 interesting stories so far tonight. Let's hope they continue to be interesting. Of course, those were both clearly about Brittany. And they both came from a French book. Translated back into English. That's just weird. Anyway. Binojon. Oh, wait. This might be... I'll mention Hereford. So it's another one from Great Britain, at least. Yeah, it's definitely going to be like looking at the names. Which, of course, will be fun to pronounce because I like somewhat Celtic names. Anyway. Our next story for this fabulous Friday Night of Fairy Tales. The Escape of the Mouse. Olwen, the prince, and his friend Piederi were wanderers, for the brother of Manwadan had been slain, and his throne taken from him. Very sorrowful was Manwadan, and Piederi was stout of heart, and bade him to be good cheer, for he knew a way out of his trouble. "And what may that be?" said Manwadan. "If thou marry my mother Rhiannon, and become lord of fair lands that I will give her for dowry, never did any lady have more wit than she, and in her youth none was more lively. Even yet she is good to look upon." Wow. So, marry my mom. She's hot. "Thou art the best friend that a man ever had," said Manawydon. "Let us go back and seek Rhiannon, in the land where she dwells." Then they set forth, but the news of their coming ran swifter still, and Rhiannon and Sliva, wife of Frida, had made haste to prepare a feast for them. And when Manawydon found that Piedera had spoken the truth concerning his mother, and asked if she would take him for her husband, rightly glad that she consent, and without delay they were married, and rode away to the hunt, Rhiannon and Manawydon, and Sivka and Piedera. And they did not be parted by each other night or by day, so great was the love between them. One day, when they returned, they were sitting out in a green place, and suddenly a crash of thunder struck loudly on their ears, and a wall of mist fell between them, so that they were hidden from one another. Trembling, they sat still till the darkness fled, and the light shone again upon them. But in the place where they were once the castle, and herds, and dwellings, they beheld neither house nor beast, nor man, nor smoke. Neither was anyone remaining in the green place, save these 4 only. "Whither have they gone, and my host also?" cried Manawydon, as they searched the hall, and there was no man, and the castle, and there was none, and in the dwellings there were none, save the wild beasts. For a year these 4 fed on the meat that Manawydon and Piederi killed at hunting, and the honey of bees they sucked from the mountain heather. For a time they desired nothing more, but when the next year began, they grew weary. "We cannot spend our lives thus," said Manawydon at last. "Let us go into England and learn some trade by which we may live." So they left Wales and went to Hereford, and there they made saddles, while Manawydon fashioned blue enamel ornaments to put on their trappings. And so greatly did the townsfolk love these saddles that no others were bought throughout the whole of Hereford, till the saddlers banded together and resolved to slay Manawydon and his companions. But when Piederi heard of it, he was very wroth, and wished to stay and fight. But the counsels of Manawydon prevailed, and they moved by night to another city. "What craft shall we follow?" asked Frida. "We shall make shields," said Manawydon. "But do we know anything of that craft?" answered Piederi. "We will try," said Manawydon, and they began to make shields.
and fashioned them after the shape of the shields they had seen, and these likewise they enameled. And so greatly did they prosper that no man in town bought a shield except they had made it, till at length the shield makers banded together as the saddlers had done, and resolved to slay them. But of this they had warning, and by night betook themselves to another town. "Let us try making shoes," said Mendeliden, "for there are not many among the shoemakers bold enough to fight us." "I know nothing of crafting shoes," answered Pryderi, who in truth despised so peaceful a craft. "But I know," answered Merlin, "and I will teach thee to stitch. We will buy the leather already dressed, and we will make shoes from it." Then straightway he sought the town for the best leather, and for a goldsmith to fashion the clasps, and he himself watched till it was done, so that he might learn for himself. And soon he became known as the maker of gold shoes, and prospered so greatly that long no one could buy a shoe from him, and not a shoe was and prospered so greatly that as long as one could be bought from him, not the shoe was purchased from the other shoemakers in town. And the craftsmen were wroth, and banded together to slay them. "Pryderi," said Manithuin, when we had heard the news, "we shall not remain in England any longer. Let us set forth to Ivan." So they journeyed until they came to their lands of Nabarth. There they gathered dogs around them, and hunted for years before. After a strange thing happened. One morning Pryderi and Medwin rose to hunt, and loosened their dogs, which ran before them, until they came to a small bush. At the bush the dogs shrank away as if frightened, and returned to their masters, their hair bristling on their backs. "We must see what is in that bush," said Pryderi, and what was in it was a boar, with a skin as white as the snow on the mountains. And he came out and made a stand as the dogs rushed on him, and driven on by the men. Long he stood at bay. Then at last he betook himself to flight, and fled to a castle which was newly built, in a place where no building has ever shone. Into the castle he ran, and the dogs after him, and long though their masters looked and listened, they neither saw nor heard aught concerning the dogs or boar. "I will go to the castle and get tidings of the dogs," said Pryderi at last. "Truly," answered Madeline, "thou shouldst do unwisely, for whoever has cast a spell over this land has set this castle here." "I cannot give up my dogs," replied Pryderi, as he went to the castle. But within was neither man nor beast, neither boar nor dogs, but only a fountain with marble around it, and on the edge sat a golden bowl, richly wrought, which pleased Pryderi greatly. In a moment he forgot about his dogs, and went up to the bowl and took hold of it, and his hands stuck to the bowl, and his feet to the marble slab, and despair took possession of him. Till the close of day, Manithuin waited for it, and when the sun was sinking fast, he went home, thinking that he had strayed far. "Where is thy friend and thy dogs?" asked Rhiannon, and he told her what had befallen Pryderi. "A good friend hast thou lost," answered Rhiannon, and she went up to the castle and through the gate which was open. There in the center of the courtyard she beheld Pryderi standing, and hastened towards him. "What dost thou here?" she asked, laying her hand on the bowl. And as she spoke, she too stuck fast, and was unable to utter a word. Then thunder was heard, and a veil of darkness descended upon them, and the castle vanished, and they did with it. And Kisva, the wife of Pryderi, found that neither her husband nor his mother returned to her. She was in such sorrow that she cared not whether she lived or died. Mendelwin was grieved also in his heart, and said to her, "It is not fitting that we should stay here, for we have lost our dogs and cannot get food. Let us go into England. It is easier for us to live there." And so they set forth. "What craft wilt we follow?" asked she as they went along. "I shall make shoes as I once did," replied he, and he got all the finest leather in the town, and caused gilded clasps to be made for the shoes, till everyone flocked to buy, and all the shoemen in town were idle and banded together, angered to kill him. But luckily Manithuin had got word of it, and he and Siva left town one night and proceeded to Nabarth, taking with him a sheaf of wheat, which he sowed in 3 plots of ground. And while the wheat was growing, he hunted and fished, and they had enough food and to spare. Thus the months passed until the harvest, and one evening Moradin visited the furthest of his fields of wheat, and saw that it was ripe. "Tomorrow I will reap this," he said. But on the morrow when he went to reap, he found the wheat was nothing more than bare straw. Filled with dismay, he hastened to the second field. There the corn was ripe and golden. "Tomorrow I will reap this," he said. But on the morrow the ears had gone, and there was nothing but the bare stalks. "Well, there is one field left," he said, and when he looked at it, it was still fairer than the other 2. "Tonight I will watch here." Though he thought, "For whoever carried off the other corn will in like manner take this, and I will know who it is." So he hid and waited. The hours slid by, and all was still, so still the men well nigh dropped to sleep. But at midnight there rose the loudest tumult in the world, and peeping out he beheld a mighty host of mice, which could neither be numbered nor measured. Each mouse climbed up a stalk till it bent down with its weight, and then it bit off one of the ears and carried it away. There was not one of the straws that had not got a mouse in it. Full of wrath he rushed at the mice, but he could no more come up with them than he had with any of the gnats, birds in the air, save one which only lingered behind the rest. And this mouse Moradin came up with, stooped down and seized it by the tail and put it in his glove, and tied a piece of string across the opening of his glove, so that the mouse could not escape. When he entered the hall where Shiva was waiting, he lighted a fire, and hung the glove upon a peg. "What hast thou there?" asked she. "A thief," he answered, "that I caught robbing me." "What kind of thief may it be that thou couldst put in a glove?" said Shiva. "That I will tell thee," he replied, and then he showed her how his field of corn had been wasted, and how he had watched for the mice. "And one was less nimble than the rest, and is now in my glove. Tomorrow I will hang it. I only wish I had them all." "It is a marvel, truly," said she. "Yet it would be unseemly for a man of thy dignity to hang a reptile such as this. Do not meddle with it, but let it go." "Woe betide me," he cried, "if I could not hang them all, if I could catch them, and such a thing I will have hang." "Verily," she said, "there's no reason that I should secure this reptile except to prevent discredit unto thee." "If I knew any cause that I could secure it, I would take thy counsel," answered Madeline. "But as I know none, I am minded to destroy it." "Do so then," said Shiva. So he went up a hill and set up 2 forks on top. While he was doing this, he saw a scholar coming towards him, whose clothes were tattered. Now it was 7 years since Manuel had seen a man or beast in this place, so the sight amazed him. "Good day to thee, my lord," said the scholar. "Greeting to thee, scholar. Whence dost thou come?" "From singing in England, but wherefore dost thou ask?" "Because for 7 years no man has visited this place." "I wonder where I will," answered the scholar. What work art thou upon?" "I'm about to hang a thief that I caught robbing me." "What manner of thief is that?" inquired the scholar. "I see a creature in thy hand, like a mouse, and ill does it become a man of thy rank to touch a reptile like this. Let it go free." "I will not let it go free," cried Madeline. "I caught it robbing me, and it shall suffer the doom of a thief." "Lord," said the scholar, "sooner than see a man like thee at such work, I would give thee £1 which I have received in alms to let her go free." "I will not let it go free, neither will I sell it." "As thou wilt," answered the scholar, and he went his way. Madeline was placing a crossbeam on the 2 forked sticks, and the mouse was to hang, where a priest rode past. "Good day to thee, lord, and what art thou doing?" "I'm hanging a thief that I caught robbing me." "What manner of thief, lord?" "A creature in the form of a mouse. It has been robbing me, and it shall suffer the doom of a thief." "Lord," said the priest, Sooner than you touch this reptile, I should purchase its freedom. I would neither sell it nor set it free. If it is true that a mouse is worth nothing, but rather than see it defile thyself by touching a reptile such as this, I'll give thee £3 for it. I will not take any price for it. It shall be hanged as it deserves. Willingly, my lord, if this is thy pleasure. And the priest went his way. The Menowin noosed up a string over the mouse's neck, and began to draw it tight around, when a bishop, with a great following of horses bearing huge packs, came by. "What art thou doing upon?" asked the bishop, drawing rein. "Hanging a thief I caught robbing me." "But is not that a mouse that I see in thine hand?" asked the bishop. "Yes, that is the thief," answered Menowin. "Well, since I have come to doom this reptile, I will ransom it for £7, rather than see a man of thy rank touch it. Loose it, and let it go." "I will not let it loose." "I will give thee £24 to set it free," said the bishop. "I will not set it free for as much again." "If thou wilt not set it free for this, I will give thee all the horses thou seest, and 7 loads of baggage." "I will not set it free." "Then tell me at what price thou wilt loose it, and I will give it." "The spell must be taken off of Rhiannon and Friday," said Menowin. "That shall be done." "But yet not yet. I will loose the mouse, and charm that has been cast over all my lands must be taken off likewise." "This shall be done also." "But not yet will I loose the mouse, till I know who she is." "She is my wife," answered the bishop. "And wherefore came she to me?" asked Menowin. "To despoil thee," replied the bishop, "for it is I who cast a charm over thy lands to avenge Groac'h, the son of Clud, my friend, and it was I who threw the spell over Pradon to avenge Groac'h for the trick that had been played on him by the game of Badger in the Bag. Not only was I wroth, but my people likewise, and when it was known that thou hadst come to dwell in the land, they besought me much to change them into mice, that they might eat thy corn. And first and second nights it was the men of my house who destroyed 2 fields, but on the third my wife and her ladies came to me and begged me to change them also in the shape of mice, that they might take part in the revenge in Groac'h. Therefore I changed them. Yet she has not been ill and slow of foot. Thou couldst not have overtaken her. Still, since she was caught, I will restore thee Prairie and Rhiannon, and will take the charm off thy lands. I have told thee who she is. Now set her free." "I will not set her free," answered Menowin, "till thou swear that no vengeance shall be taken upon for this, either for Prairie or upon Rhiannon or on me." "I grant thee this boon, and thou hast done wisely to ask for it, for on thy head would have lit all the trouble. Now set free my wife." "I will not set her free till Prairie and Rhiannon are with me." "Behold, here they come," said the bishop. Then Rhiannon held out his hands and greeted Prairie and Rhiannon, and they seated themselves joyfully on the grass. "Ah, Lord, hast thou not received all thou didst ask?" said the bishop. "Now set my wife free." "That I will gladly," answered Rhiannon, and unloosing the cord from her neck, and he did so, the bishop struck her with the staff, and she returned to a young woman, the fairest that was ever seen. "Look upon thy land," he said, "and thou wilt see that it was all tilled and people as long ago." And Menowin looked and saw the cornfield growing in his fields, and cows and sheep grazing on the hillside, and huts for the people to dwell in, and he was satisfied in his soul. But one more question he put on the bishop. "What spell didst thou lay upon Friday and Rhiannon?" "Piety has had the knockers of my gate of the palace hung around him. Rhiannon has carried the collars of my asses around her neck," said the bishop with a smile. Wow. A bishop cursing people. Turned his wife into a mouse. I see one flaw in this problem. He did not ask for the prevention of Pryderi's wife to be cursed. He asked for everyone else. Forgot about her. He asked for his friend and his wife, but not his friend's wife to be safe. Oh. The next story for the night: The Believing Husbands. Once upon a time there dwelt in the land of Erin a young man who was seeking a wife, and of all the maidens round, that none pleased him so well as the only daughter of a farmer. The girl was willing, and the father was willing, and very soon they were married, and went to live at the farm. By and by the season came that they must cut off the peats and pile them up to dry, so that they might have fires in the winter. So, on a fine day, the girl and her husband, and the father and his wife, all went out upon the moor. They worked hard for many hours, and at length grew hungry, so the young woman was sent home to bring them food, and also to give the horses their dinner. When she went in the stable, she suddenly saw the heavy pack-saddle of the speckled mare just over her head, and she jumped and said to herself, "Suppose that pack-saddle were to fall and kill me, how dreadful it would be!" And she sat down under the pack-saddle she was so much afraid of, and began to cry. Now the others out on the moor grew hungrier and hungrier. "What can have become of her?" they asked, and at length the mother declared that she would wait no longer, and she must go and see what happened. As the bride was nowhere in the kitchen or in the dairy, the old woman went into the stable, where she found her daughter weeping bitterly. "What is the matter, my dove?" And the girl answered between her sobs, "When I came in and saw the pack-saddle over my head, I thought how dreadful it would be if it fell and killed me." And she cried louder than before. The woman struck her hands together. "Ah, I did not think of it. What if it were to be? What should I do?" And she sat down by her daughter, and both wrung their hands, and let their tears flow. "Something strange must have occurred," exclaimed the old farmer to the old farmer on the moor. By this time he was not only hungry but cross. "I must go after them." And he went and found them in a stable. "What is the matter?" asked he. "Oh," replied his wife, "when our daughter came home, and she did not see the pack-saddle over her head, and she thought how dreadful it would have been if she would fall and kill her." "Ah, to think of it!" exclaimed he, striking hands together, and he sat down beside them, and wept too. As soon as night fell, the young man returned, full of hunger, and there they were, crying together in the stable. "What's the matter?" he asked. "When thy wife came home," answered the farmer, "she saw the pack-saddle over her head, and she thought how dreadful it would be if it would fall and kill her." "Well, it didn't fall," replied the man, and off he went to the kitchen to get some supper, leaving them to cry as long as they liked. The next morning he got up with the sun, and said to the old man, to the old woman, and to his wife, "Farewell, I will not set foot upon Farewell, my foot shall not return to the house till I have found other people as silly as you." And he walked away till he came to the town. Seeing a door of a cottage standing wide open, he entered. No man was present, but only some women spinning at their wheels. "You do not belong in this town," said he. "You speak truth," they answered. "Nor you either?" "I do not," he replied, "but it is a good place to live." The women looked at each other. The men in this town are so silly that we can make them believe anything we please," said they. "Well, here is a gold ring," he replied. "I will give it to the one who amongst you who can make her husband believe the most impossible thing." And he left them. As soon as the first husband came home, his wife said to him, "Thou art sick." "Am I?" asked he. "Yes, thou art," she replied. "Take off thy clothes and lie down." So he did, and when he was in his bed, his wife went to him and said, "Thou art dead." "Oh, am I?" he asked. "Thou art," she said. "Shut thine eyes and stir neither hand nor foot." And dead he felt sure he was. Soon a second man came home, and his wife said to him, "You're not my husband." "Oh, am I not?" he asked. "No, it is not you," answered she. So he went away and slept in the woods. When the third man arrived, his wife gave him a supper, and after that he went to bed as usual. The next morning a boy knocked at the door, bidding him to attend the funeral of the man who was dead, and he was just going to get up when his wife stopped him. "Time enough," she said, and he will lay still till he heard the funeral window passing. Let's see. Next morning the boy knocked at the door, bidding him to attend the burial of the man who was dead, and he was going to get up when his wife stopped him. "Time enough," she said, and he lay still till he heard the funeral pass in the window. "Now rise and be quick," answered she, and the man jumped out of bed in a hurry and began to look about him. "Where are my clothes?" he asked. "So that you are, they're on your back, of course," answered the woman. "Are they?" he said. "Yes, they are," she said, "and make haste lest the burying be ended before you get there." Then off he went, running hard, and when the mourners saw a man coming towards him with nothing on but his nightshirt, they forgot in their fright what they were there for, and fled to hide themselves, and the naked man stood very alone at the head of the coffin. Very soon a man came out of the wood and spoke to him. "Do you know me?" "Not I," answered the naked man. "I do not know you." "But why are you naked?" asked the first man. "Am I naked? My wife told me that I had all my clothes on," he answered. "My wife told me that I was myself dead," answered the man in the coffin. At the sound of his voice, the two men were so terrified that they ran straight home, and the man in the coffin got up and followed them, and it was his wife who gave to the gold ring, as he had been sillier than the other two. The farmer's wife clearly had depression, because, well, that's really a good sign of depression. Whole family seems to have it. If they all go outside and, oh, wait, dang it, forgot to do Easter stuff for Pokemon. But yeah, the woman came home and realized the inevitable doom and was completely immersed afterwards. Her mother followed suit, as did her father. So it's not so much silly as in just anxiety and depression. Anyway, our next story for the night, which the title makes me think of a modern goth girl. You'll get it when I tell you the title. The Hoodie-Crow. Once there lived a man who had 3 daughters, and good, useful girls were they, up with the sun and doing all the work of the house. One morning they all ran down to the river to wash their clothes, when a hoodie came round and sat on a tree close by. "Wilt thou wed me, thou farmer's daughter?" said he to the eldest. "Indeed I won't wed thee," she answered. "An ugly brute is my hoodie, and the bird, much offended, spread his wings and flew away. But the following day he came back again, and said to the second girl, "Wilt thou wed me, farmer's daughter?" "Indeed I will not," answered she. "An ugly brute is the hoodie." And the hoodie was more angry than before, and went away in a rage. However, after a night's rest he was in better temper, and thought he might be more lucky the third time, so he went back to the old place. "Wilt thou marry me, farmer's daughter?" he said to the youngest. "Indeed I will wed thee, pretty creature is a hoodie," answered she, and on the morrow they were married. "I have something to ask thee," said the hoodie when they were far away in his own house. "Wouldst thou rather I should be a hoodie by day and a man by night, or a man by day and a hoodie by night?" The girl was surprised at his words, for she did not know that he could be anything but the hoodie at all times. Still she said nothing of this, and only replied, "I'd rather that wert a man by day and a hoodie by night." And so he was, and a handsomer man and more beautiful hoodie was ever seen. The girl loved them both, and never wished for things to be different. By and by, they had a son, and very pleased they both were. But in the night, soft music was heard stealing close towards the house, and every man slept, and the mother slept also. When they woke again, it was morning, and the baby was gone. High and low they looked for it, but nowhere could they find it, and the farmer, who had come to see his daughter, was greatly grieved, and he feared it might be a thought that he had stolen it, because it did not want the hoodie for a son-in-law. The next year the hoodie's wife had another son, and this time a watch was set at every door, but it was no use. In vain they all determined that come what might, they would not close their eyes, and at the first note of music they all fell asleep. And when the farmer arrived in the morning to see his grandson, he found them all weeping, for while they had slept, the baby had vanished. Well, the next year it all happened again, and the hoodie's wife was so unhappy that her husband resolved to take her away to another house he had, and her sisters with her for company. So they set out in a coach that was big enough to hold them, and not gone very far when the hoodie suddenly said, "Are you sure you haven't forgotten anything?" "I forgot my coarse comb," answered the wife, feeling in her pocket. And as she spoke, the voice changed to a withered. "I forgot my coarse comb," said the wife, feeling in her pocket. And as she spoke, the coach changed into a withered faggot, and the man became a hoodie again, and flew away. Two sisters returned home, but the wife followed the hoodie. Sometimes she would see him on a hilltop, and then would hasten to him, hoping to catch him. But by the time she had got to the top of the hill, he would be in the valley on the other side. When night came and she was tired, she looked about for some place to rest, and was glad to see a little house full of light straight in front of her, and she hurried towards it as fast as she could. At the door stood a little boy, and the sight of him filled her heart with pleasure, and she did not know why. A woman came out and bade her welcome, and set food before her, and gave her a soft bed to lie on. And the hoodie's wife lay down, and so tired was she that it seemed to her but a moment before the sun rose and she awoke again. From hill to hill she went after the hoodie, and sometimes she saw him on top, and then she was on top, he had been down in the valley. And when she reached the valley, he was on top of another hill. And so it happened till night came round again. Then she looked around for some place to rest in, and beheld her little house with light just as before, and fast she hurried towards it. At the door stood a little boy, and her heart was filled with pleasure at the sight of him, but she did not know why. After that the woman bade her enter, and she set food before her, and gave her a soft bed to lie in. And when the sun rose she got up and left the house in search of the hoodie. This day everything befell as on the 2 days before, but when she approached a small house, the woman inside her bade her to keep awake, and if the hoodie flew in the room, to try to seize it. But the wife had walked far, and was very, very tired, and strive as she would, she fell sound asleep. Many hours she slept, and the hoodie entered through the window, and let a ring fall in her hand. The girl woke with a start, and leaned forward to grasp him, but he was already flying off, and only seized a feather from his wing. And when dawn came, she got up, and told the woman. "He is gone over the hill of poison," said she. "There you cannot follow him without horseshoes on your hands and feet. But I will help you. Put on this suit of men's clothes, and go down the road till you have come to a smithy, and there you can learn to make horseshoes for yourself." The girl thanked her, and put on the clothes and went down the road to do her bidding. So hard did she work that in a few days she was able to make her the horseshoes. Early one morning she set out for the hill of poison. On her hands and feet she went, but even the horseshoes she had on, not very careful to stumble, lest some poison thorn should be into her flesh and she should die. But when she was last over, it was only to hear that her husband was to be married that day to the daughter of a great lord. Now, there was to be a race in town, and everyone meant to be there, except the stranger who had come over the hill of poison. Everyone, that is, but the cook, who was to make the bridal supper. Greatly he loved races, and was sore to his heart that he could think of no one to run without seeing it. So when he beheld this woman, whom he did not know, coming along the street, Hope sprang into him. "Will you cook the wedding feast in place of me?" he asked, "and I will pay you well when I return from the race." Gladly she agreed, and cooked the feast in the kitchen that looked like the great hall where the company were to eat it. After that she watched the seat where the bridegroom was sitting, and taking a plateful of broth, she dropped the ring and the feather into it, and set it before him. With the first spoonful he took up the ring. A thrill ran through him. In the second he beheld the feather and rose from his chair. "Who cooked this feast?" he asked, and the real cook, who had come back from the race, was brought before him. "He may be the cook, but he did not cook the feast," said the bridegroom. An inquiry was made, and the girl was summoned to the great hall. "That is my married wife," he declared. "No one else will I have." And at the very moment the spell was fell from him. Never more would he be a Hoodie. Happy indeed were they to be together again, and little did they mind the hill of poison took so long to cross, for she had to go some way forwards and then throw the horseshoes back to him and put on. Till at last they were over, and they went back the way she had come, and stopped at the 3 houses, in order to take their little sons back to them on their way home. But the story never does say who stole them, nor what the coarse comb had anything to do with. 20 some odd minutes. We have 2 stories left. So I guess we're going to finish this book. If no one minds, that is. No? Okay, I will continue then. By all means, people watch the Pokemon community game because there are Easter eggs going. This does seem like a pretty good Friday. No. The Brownie of the Lake. Once upon a time there lived in France a man whose name was Jean Ryu. You might have walked a whole day without meeting anyone happier or more contented, for he had a large farm, plenty of money, and above all, a daughter called Barbara, who was the most graceful dancer and best dressed girl in the whole countryside. When she appeared on holidays in her embroidered cap, 5 petticoats, each one a little shorter than the other, and shoes with silver buckles, the women were all filled with envy, and little cared Firebuck what they might whisper behind her back, as long as she knew that the clothes were finer than anyone else's, and that she had more partners than any other girl. Now amongst all the young men who wanted to marry Firebuck, the one whose heart was most set on her was her father's head man. As his manners were rough and he was exceedingly ugly, she would have nothing to say to him, and what was worse, often made fun of him with the rest. Jagu, that was his name, of course heard of this, and it made him very unhappy. Still he would not leave the farm or look for work elsewhere, as he might have done, for then he would never see Firebuck at all, and what was life worth to him without that? One evening he was bringing back his horses from the fields, and stopped at a little lake on the way home to look and drink. He was tired with a long day's work, and stood with his hand on the mane of one of his animals, waiting till they had done, and thinking all the while of Firebuck, when a voice came out to Groac'h nearby. "What's the matter, Jagu? You mustn't despair yet." A young man glanced up in surprise, and asked who was there. "It is I, the Brownie of the Lake," replied the voice. "But where are you?" inquired Jagu. "Look close. You'll see me among the reeds in the form of a little green frog I can take," added proudly. "Any shape I choose, and even, which is much harder, to be invisible if I want to." "Then show yourself to me in the shape which your family generally appears," replied Jagu. "Certainly, if you wish." And the frog jumped on the back of one of the horses, and changed into a little dwarf, all dressed in green. His transformation rather frightened Jagu, but the brownie bade him have no fears, for he would not do him any harm. Indeed, he hoped that Jagu might find him some use. But why would you take all this interest in me? He asked suspiciously. Because of a service you did me last winter, which I have never forgotten. Oh, you know, I am sure that the Groac'h who dwell in the White Corn Country have declared a war on my people, because they say that they are friends of man. We were therefore obliged to take refuge in distant lands, and to hide ourselves at first under different animal shapes. Since that time, partly from habit and partly to amuse ourselves, we have continued to transform ourselves, and it is in this way that I got to know you. How? Exclaimed Jagu, filled with astonishment. Again, 2 bots in a row. What the hell? Well, I was a robin redbreast, and ever since I have vowed... How? Exclaimed Jagu, filled with astonishment. Do you remember when you were digging in the field near the river 3 months ago, and you found a robin redbreast caught in a net? Yes, answered Jagu. I remember it well, and I opened the net and let him go. Well, I was that robin redbreast. Ever since I have vowed to be your friend, and as you want to marry Barbuck, I will prove the truth of what I say by helping you to do so. Ah, my little brownie, if you can do that, there's nothing I won't give you, except my soul. Then let me alone, rejoined the dwarf, and I promise you that in a few months you shall be the master of the farm and of Barbuck. But how are you going to do this? Exclaimed Jagu wonderingly. That is my affair. Perhaps I may tell you later. Meanwhile, you just eat and sleep and don't worry yourself about anything. Jagu declared that nothing could be easier, and then taking off his hat, he thanked the dwarf heartily and led his horses back to the farm. The next morning was a holiday, and Barbuck was awake earlier than usual, as she wished to get through her work as soon as possible and be ready to start for a dance which was to be held some distance off. She first went to the cow-house, which it was her duty to keep clean, but to her amazement she found fresh straw put down, and racks filled with hay, the cows milked, and the pails standing neatly in a row. Of course Jagu must have done this in my hope of giving him my dance, she thought to herself, and when she met him outside the door she stopped and thanked him for his help. To be sure, Jagu only replied roughly that he didn't know what she was talking about, but his answer made her feel all the more certain that it was he and nobody else. The same thing took place every day. Never had the cow-house been so clean, or the cows so fat. Morning and evening Barbuck found her earthen pots full of milk, a pound of butter freshly churned, ornamented with leaves. At the end of a few weeks she grew used to the state of affairs, that she only got up just in time to prepare breakfast. Soon even this grew unnecessary, for a day arrived when, coming downstairs, she discovered that the house was swept, the furniture polished, the fire lit, and the food ready, so that she had nothing to do except to ring the great bell which summoned the laborers from the field to come and eat. This also she thought was the work of Jagu, and she could not help feeling that a husband of this sort would be very useful to a girl who liked to lie in bed and to amuse herself. Indeed, Barbuck had only wished to express the wish for it to be satisfied. If the wind was cold or the sun was hot, and she was afraid to go lest her complexion should be spoilt, she need only to run down to the spring close by and say softly, "I would like my churns to be full, and the spring close by. No. I would like my churns to be full, and the wet linen to be stretched on the hedge to dry." And she never need give another thought to the matter. If she found the rye bread too hard to bake, or the oven taking too long to heat, she just murmured, "I should like to see 6 loaves of the shelf above the bread box." And 2 hours after, they were there. If she was too lazy to walk all the way to the market along a dirty road, she would say out loud the night before, "Why am I not already back from Morlax with the milk pot empty and the loaded bowls inside it, and a pound of wild cherries on my wooden plate, and the money I have gained in my apron pocket?" In the morning, when she got up, lo and behold, there were standing at the foot of her bed the empty milk pot and the butter bowl inside, the black cherries on the wooden plate, and 6 new pieces of silver in the pocket of her apron. And she believed all this was a doom for Groac'h, and she could no longer do without him, even in her thoughts. When things had reached this pass, the Brownie told the young man that he had better ask Barbec to marry him. This time the girl did not turn rudely away, but listened patiently in the end. In her eyes he was ugly and awkward as ever, but he would certainly make the most useful husband, and she could sleep every morning till breakfast time, just as a young lady, and as for the rest of the day, it would not be half long to get all the work she had meant to do. She would wear beautiful dresses that came when she wished for them, visit her neighbors, who would be dying of envy all the while, and she would be able to dance as much as she wished. Groac'h would always be there to work for her, and to save for her, to watch over her. So, like a well-brought-up girl, Barbec answered that it should be her father who was pleased, knowing quite well that old Rio had often said that after he was dead, there was no one so capable as carrying on the farm. The marriage took place the following month. A few days later, the old man died quite suddenly. Now Groac'h had everything to see to himself, and somehow it did not seem so easy as when the farmer had been alive. But once more the Brownie stepped in, and was better than 10 laborers. It was he who plowed and rode and There was he who plowed and sowed and reaped, and if was happened occasionally, it was needful to get the work done quickly. The Brownie called in some of his friends, and as soon as it was light, a host of little dwarfs might have been seen in the fields, busy with hoe, fork, or sickle. By the time the people were about, all was finished, and the little fellows had disappeared. All the payments the Brownie ever asked for was a bowl of broth. And every day of her marriage, Barbec noted the surprise and rage that things ceased to be done for her as they had been done the weeks and months before. She complained to Groac'h of his laziness, and he stared at her, not understanding what she was talking about. But the Brownie, who was standing by, burst out laughing, and confessed that all the good offices he spoke of had been performed by him, for the sake of Groac'h. But now that he had other business to do, and it was high time that she looked after the house herself. Barbec was furious. Each morning when she was obliged to get up to before dawn to milk the cows and go to market, and each evening she had to sit up till midnight in order to churn the butter, her heart was filled with rage against the Brownie who had caused her to expect a life of ease and pleasure. But when she looked at Groac'h and beheld his red face, squinting eyes, and untidy hair, her anger was doubled. "If it had not been for you, you miserable dwarf," she would say between her teeth, "if it had not been for you, I should never have married that man, and I should have been going to dances where the young men would have brought me presents of nuts and cherries, and told me that I was the prettiest girl in the parish, while now I can receive no presents except from my husband. I can never dance except with my husband. Oh, you wretched dwarf, I will never, never forgive you." In spite of her fierce words, no one knew better than Barbec how to put her pride in her pocket as a suitor. And after receiving an invitation to a wedding, she begged the Brownie to get her horse to ride there. To her great joy, he consented, bidding her set out for the city of the dwarfs to tell them exactly what she wanted. Full of excitement, Barbec started on her journey. It was not long when she reached the town, and she went straight to the dwarfs, who were holding council in a wide green place, and said to them, "Listen, my friends, I have come to beg you to lend me a black horse, with eyes and mouth, ears, and bridle and saddle." She had hardly spoken when the horse appeared, and mounting on his back she started for the village where the wedding was to be held. At first she was so delighted with the chance of a holiday from the work she had hated, that she noticed nothing, but very soon it struck her as odd as she passed all the roads full of people. They all laughed as they looked at her horse.
At length she caught some words uttered by one man to another. "Why, the farmer's wife has sold her horse's tail." And she turned in her saddle, and yes, it was true. Her horse had no tail. And turned in her saddle. She had forgotten to ask for one, and the wicked dwarfs had carried out her orders to the letter. "At any rate, I shall be there soon," she thought, and shaking the reins, urged her horse to a gallop. But it was of no use. It declined to move out of her walk. Now she was forced to hear all the jokes that were made upon her. In the evening she returned to the farm, more angry than ever, and was quite determined to revenge herself on the Brownie whenever she had the chance, which happened to be very soon. It was the spring, and just in the time of year when the dwarfs held their fete, and one day the Brownie asked Jagu if he might bring his friends to have supper in the great barn, and whether he would allow them to dance there. Of course, Jagu was only too pleased to be able to do anything for the Brownie, and he ordered Bareback to spread her best tablecloths in the barn, and make a quantity of little loaves and pancakes, besides, to keep all the milk given by the cows that morning. He expected she would refuse, as he knew she hated the dwarfs, but she said nothing, and prepared the supper as he had bidden her. When all was ready, the dwarfs in new green suits came bustling in, very happy and merry, and took their seats at the table. But in a moment they all sprang up with a cry and ran screaming away, for Bareback had placed hot pans of coals under their feet, and all their poor little toes were burnt. "You won't forget that in a hurry," she said, smiling grimly to herself, and in a moment they were back again with large pots of water, which they poured on the fire. Then they joined hands and danced around, singing, "Wicked treacherous Barbaroo, our poor toes are burned by you. Now we hurry from your hall, bad luck light upon you all." That evening they left the country forever, and Jagu, without their help, grew poorer and poorer, and at last he died of misery, while Bareback was glad to find work in the market of the Marlex. There's one story left. I have 2 ad pauses left I can use, so we might be able to do this. So, last story of the Lilac Fairy Book. The Winning of Olwen. There was once a king and queen who had a little boy, and they called his name Groac'h. His mother, the queen, soon fell ill after his birth, and she could not take care of him herself. She sent him to a woman she knew up in the mountains, so that he might learn to grow up in all weathers, and bear heat and cold, and grow tall and strong. Groac'h was quite happy with his nurse, and ran races and climbed hills with the children who were his playfellows. And in the winter, when the snow lay on the ground, sometimes a man with a harp would stop and beg for shelter, and in return would sing them songs of strange things that had happened in the years gone by. But long before this, charges had taken place in the court of Groac'h's father. Soon after she had sent the baby away, the queen became much worse, and at length, seeing that she was going to die, she called her husband to her and said, "Never again shall I rise from this bed, and by I will take another wife. But lest she should make thee forget thy son, I charge thee that thou not take a wife till thou see a briar with 2 blossoms upon thy grave." And this he promised her. Then she further bade him to see to her grave that nothing might grow thereon. And likewise he promised her, as soon as she died, for 7 years the king sent out a man every morning to see that nothing was growing on the queen's grave. But at the end of 7 years, he forgot. One day, when the king was out hunting, he rode past the place where the queen lay buried. There he saw a briar growing, with 2 blossoms on it. "It is time that I took a wife," he said. And after long looking, he found one. He did not tell her about his son. Indeed, he hardly remembered that he had one, until she heard it at last from an old woman whom she had gone to visit. And the new queen was very pleased, and sent messengers to fetch the boy, and in his father's court he stayed. All the years went by, till one day the queen told him of a prophecy
It was foretold that he was to win for his wife, Olwen, the daughter of Yspadon Penquar. When he heard this, Groac'h felt proud and happy. Surely he must be a man now, he thought, and there would be no talk of a wife for him. And his mind dwelt upon day until his promised bride, and what she would be like when he beheld her. "What aileth thee, my son?" asked the father at last, and Groac'h had forgotten something he had been bidden to do, and Groac'h blushed red as he answered, "My stepmother says that none but Olwen, the daughter of Yspadon Penquar, shall be my wife." "That is easily fulfilled," replied his father. "Arthur's king, thy cousin. Go therefore unto him, and beg him to cut thy hair, and to grant thy son this boon." Then the youth pricked forth upon a dapple-grey horse, 4 years old, and with a bridle of linked gold, and a saddle upon. In his hand he bore 2 spears of silver with heads of steel, a war horn of ivory that was slung around his shoulder. By his side hung a golden sword. Before him were 2 bridled, white-breasted greyhounds with collars of rubies around their necks, and the one that was on the left side bounded across to the right, and the one that's the right side to the left, like the 2 sea swallows sported around him. And his horse cast up 4 sods with his 4 hooves, like 4 swallows in the air about his head, above now and now below. About him was a robe of purple, and an apple of gold was at each corner. Every one of the apples was of the value of 100 cows. The blades of grass bent not beneath him, so light were his horse's feet that he journeyed toward the gate of Arthur's palace. "Is there a porter?" cried Groac'h, looking round for someone to open the gate. "There is, and I am Arthur's porter every first day of January," answered a man coming up to him. "The rest of the year there are other porters, and among them is Pepington, who goes upon his head to save his feet." "Well, open the portal, I say." "No, that I may not do, for none can enter save the son of a king or a peddler who sells goods to sell. But also there will be food for thy dogs, and hay for thy horse, and with the 3 collops cooked and peppered, and sweet wine shall be served in the great guest chamber." "That will not do for me," answered Groac'h. "If thou wilt not open the gate, I will send up 3 shouts that shall be heard from Cornwall to the north, and yet again to Ireland." "Oh, clamour however thou mayest," said Gillen, the porter. "Thou shalt not enter until I first go and speak with Arthur." Then Gelwell went into the hall. Arthur said to him, "Hast thou news from the gate?" And the porter answered, "Far I have travelled, both in the island and elsewhere, and many kingly I have seen, and I have never yet beheld the equal in majesty to him who now stands at the door." "If walking thou didst enter here, running thou shalt return," replied Arthur, "and let every one that opens or shuts their eye show him their respect and serve him. For it is not meet to keep with such a man in the wind and rain." So Lone unbarred the gate, and Groac'h rode upon his charger. "Greeting to thee, O ruler of this land," cried he, "and greeting no less to the lowest than to the highest." "Greeting to thee also," answered Arthur. "Sit thou between 2 of my warriors, and thou shalt have minstrels before thee, and all that belongs to one born to a king, whilst thou remainest in my palace." "I am not come," cried Groac'h, "for meat and drink, but to obtain a boon, and if thou grant it to me, I will pay it back, and will carry the praise to the 4 winds of heaven. But if thou wilt not grant it to me, then I will proclaim thy discourtesy wherever thy name is known." "What thou askest thou shalt receive," said Arthur. "As far as the wind dries, and the rain moistens, and the sun revolves, and the sea encircles, the earth extends, save only my ship and my mantle, my sword and my lance, my shield and my dagger, and Guinevere my wife." "I wish thou bless my hair," said Groac'h, and Arthur answered, "That shall be granted thee." Forthwith he bade his men fetch him a comb of gold and scissors with loops of silver, and he combed the hair of Groac'h the Great, or Groac'h his guest. "Tell me who thou art," he said, "for my heart warms to thee, and I feel thou art come of my blood." "I am Groac'h, son of Kildunt," replied the youth. "Then my cousin thou art in truth," replied the answer, and whatsoever boon thou mayest ask, thou shalt receive. The boon I crave is that thou mayest win for me Olwen, the daughter of Yspadon Penkwa, and this boon I seek likewise at the hands of thy warriors, from Sol, who can stand all day upon one foot, from Ossel, who, if he were to find himself on top of the highest mountain in the world, could make it into a level plain with the beat of a bird's wing, and from Thust, who, though he were buried under the earth, could yet hear the ants leave their nest 50 miles away, and these from Cain of Bedwer, all thy mighty men, I crave this boon. Kill witch, said Arthur. Never have I heard of the mention of the maiden whom you seekest, nor of her kindred. But I will send messengers to seek her, if that will give me thine time. From this night to the end of the year, right willingly I will grant thee, replied Kilwich. But when the end of the year come, and this messenger is returned in Kilwich's wrath, and spoke rough words to Arthur. It was Kay, the bravest, the boldest of the warriors and swiftest of foot, who had passed 9 nights without sleep and 9 days without water, that answered him. Rest youth thou art, darest thou speak thus of Arthur? Come with us, and we will not party till we have won the maiden, or till I confess that there is none such in the world. Then Arthur summoned his 5 best men and bade them go with Kilwich. There was Bedwer, the one-handed, Kai's comrade and brother in arms, the swiftest man in Britain, save Arthur. And then there was Kennelich, who knew the paths in the land where he had never been as surely as those he had known of his own country. Then there was Groac'h, who could speak all the tongues, while Machi, the son of Gwar, who never returned till he had gained what he sought. And last of all there was Minwa, who could weave a spell under them so that none might see them, and while they could see everyone. So these 7 journeyed together till they reached a vast open plain in which the fair castle. But though it seemed so close, it was not until the evening of the 3rd day that they really drew near to it, and in front of it a flock of sheep was spread, so many in number that there seemed no end of them. A shepherd stood on a mound watching over them, and by his side was a dog, large as a horse, 9 winters old. "Who is this castle, herdsman?" asked the knights. "Stupidly that, truly," replied the herdsman. "All the world knows this is the castle of Yspadon Penkwa." "And who art thou?" "I am called Korstenen, brother of Yspadon, and ill has he treated me. And who are you, and what do you do here?" "We come from Arthur the king to seek Eldrin, the daughter of Yspadon." At this news the shepherd gave a cry. "Oh, men, be warned and turn back, yet there is time. Others have gone on that quest, and none have escaped to tell the tale." He rose quick to his feet as if to leave them. Then George told him how to ring of gold, and tried to put it on his finger, but it was too small, and so he placed it in his glove, and went home and gave it to his wife. "Whence came this ring?" asked she. "Whence came this ring?" asked she. "For good luck is not wont to befall thee." "The man to whom this ring belongs thou shalt see here in the evening," answered the shepherd. "He is Kilwich, son of Kil, cousin of King Arthur, and he has come to seek Olwen." And when the wife heard that, she knew that Kilwich was her nephew, and her heart yearned after him, and half with joy at the thought of seeing him, and half with sorrow for the doom she feared. Soon they heard steps approaching. Kay and the rest of the house came in to eat and drink. After that the woman opened a chest, and out of it came a youth with curling yellow hair. "It is a pity to hide him thus." "It is a pity to hide him thus," said Gilwer, "for well I know that he has done no evil." 23 of my sons has Yasin slain, and I have no hope for saving this one," replied she. And Kay was full of sorrow, and answered, "Let him come with me and be my comrade, and he shall never be slain unless I am slain also." And so it was agreed. "What is your errand here?" asked the woman. "We seek Olwen, the maiden, for this youth," answered Kay. "Does she come hither so that she may be seen?" "She comes every Saturday to wash her hair, In the vessel where she washes, she leaves all her rings, and never does she see such an end to a messenger to fetch them.
Will she come if she is bidden? Asked Kay, pondering.
She will come, but unless you pledge me your faith that you will not harm her, I will not fetch her.
We pledge it, said they, and the maiden came.
The fair sight was she in a robe of flame-colored silk and a collar of ruddy gold around her neck, bright with emeralds and rubies. More yellow was her head than the flower of the broom, and her skin was whiter than the foam of a wave, and fairer were her hands than the blossom of the wood anemone. 4 white trefoils sprang up where she trod, and therefore she was called Olwen. She entered and sat down on the bench beside Kilwich, and he spake to her. Ah, maiden, since I first heard thy name I have loved thee. Wilt thou not come away with me from this evil place? I cannot do so, she answered, for I have given my word to my father not to go without his knowledge, and for his life only last so I am betrothed. Whatever is must be, but this counsel I will give you. Go, and ask me of my father. Whatsoever he shall require of thee, grant it, and thou shalt win me. But if thou dost deny him anything, that will not obtain me, and it will be well for thee if thou escaped with thy life.
All this I promise, said he. So she returned to the castle, and all Arthur's men went after her, and entered the hall. Greeting to thee, Yspaddaden Penkawr, they said. Come to ask thy daughter Owen for Kilwich, son of Kilwich. Come hither tomorrow, and I will answer you, replied Yspaddaden Penkawr. As they rose to leave the hall, he caught up one of the 3 poisoned darts that lay beside him, and flung it in their midst. But Bedwyr saw it, caught it, and flung it back so hard that it pierced the knee of Yspaddaden. Gentle son-in-law, truly, he cried, writhing in pain. I shall ever walk the worse for this rudeness. Cursed be the smith who forged it, and the anvil with which it was wrought. That night the men slept in the house of Custennin, the herdsman, and the next day they proceeded to the castle and entered the hall. Yspaddaden Penkawr, give us thy daughter, and thou shalt keep her dower, and unless thou wilt do this, we will slay thee. Her 4 great-grandmothers and 4 great-grandfathers yet live, answered Yspaddaden Penkawr. It is needful that I take counsel with them. Well, be it so. We will go to meat. But then they turned and took up the 2nd dart that lay by his side and cast it after them. And Menor caught it and flung it at him and wounded him in the chest, so that it came out his back. Gentle son-in-law, truly, cried Yspaddaden. The iron pains me like the bite of a horse-leech. Cursed be the hearth whereupon it heated, and the smith who formed it. The 3rd day Arthur's men returned to the palace in the presence of Yspaddaden. Shoot not at me again, said he, unless thou desire death, but lift up my eyebrows, which have fallen over my eyes, that I may see my son-in-law. Then they rose, and they did as Yspaddaden took the 3rd poisoned dart and cast it at them. Kilwich caught it and flung it back, and it passed through his eyeball and came out to the other side of his head. A gentle son-in-law, truly, cursed by the fire in which it was forged, and the man who fashioned it. The next day Arthur's men came again to the palace and said, Shoot not at any of us any more, unless thou desire the pain even thou hast, but give us thy daughter without more words. Where is he that seeks my daughter? Let him come hither, so that I may see him. And Kilwich sat himself in a chair and spoke face to face with him. Is it thou that seekest my daughter? It is I. First, give me thy word that thou wilt do nothing towards me that is not just. And when thou hast won from me what I ask, then thou shalt wed my daughter. I promise right willingly, said Kilwich. Name what thou wilt. Seest thou yonder hill? Well, one day it shall be rooted up and ploughed and sown, and grain shall ripen,
In what weeks I will bake the cakes for my daughter's wedding. I did not see the ads in time deposit. Dang it. So, short break. I will go back a little. Okay. Let's try to get this finished. First, give me thy word that thou wilt do nothing towards me that is not just. When thou hast won from me that which I shall ask, then thou shalt wed my daughter. I promise right willingly, said Groac'h. Name what thou shalt. See thou yonder hill. Well, in one day it shall be uprooted and plowed and sown, and grain will ripen, and of that wheat I will bake the cakes for my daughter's wedding. It will be easy for me to compass this, although thou mayst deem it not easy, answered Groac'h, thinking of us, under whose feet the mightiest mountain became straightway a plain. But Isbadden paid no heed, and continued. Seest thou field yonder? When my daughter was born, 9 bushels of flax were sown therein, but not one blade has sprung up. I require thee to sow fresh flax from the ground, that my daughter may wear a veil spun from it on the day of her wedding. It will be easy for me to compass this. Though thou compass this there, that which thou wilt not compass. For thou must bring me a basket of Gwyngalahare, which will give meats to the whole world. It is for thy wedding feast. Thou must also fetch me the drinking horn that is never empty, and the harp that never ceases to play until it is bidden. Also the comb and scissors and razor that lie between the two ears of Tirith the bull, so that I may arrange my hair for the wedding. And though thou get this, yet there which the and though thou get this, yet there is that which thou wilt not get. For Tirith the bull will not let any man take from him the comb and the scissors, lest Droden the whelp hunt him. But no leash in the world can hold Reuben, save the leash of Cat Ewen, and no collar will hold the leash except the collar of Canhastia. It will be easy for me to compass this, though thou mayest think it will not be easy, George answered him. Though thou get all these things, yet there is that which thou wilt not get. Throughout the world there is none that can hunt with his dog save Mabel, the son of Modron. He is taken from his mother when 3 nights old, and does not know where he is now, nor whether he is living or dead. And though thou find him, yet the boy will never be slain, save only with the sword of Groac'h the giant. And if thou obtain it, neither shalt thou obtain my daughter. Horses shall I have, and knights from the Lord Arthur, and I shall gain thy daughter, or thou shalt lose thy life. The speech of Cerwyn, the son of Cildren, with Sped and Penquo, was ended. Then Arthur's men set forth, and Kilwich with them, and journeyed till they reached the largest castle in the world, and a black man came out to meet them. Whence comest thou, old man? They asked, and whose is that castle? It is a castle of Groac'h the giant, as all the world knows, answered the man, and no guest ever returned thence alive, and none may enter the gate except craftsman who brings his trade. But Lord Arthur's men heed this warning, and they went straight through the gate. Open, cried Rolla. I will not open, replied the porter. And wherefore? Said Kai. The knife is in the meat, and the drink is in the horn, and there is rival in the hall when it's a giant. But save for a craftsman who brings his trade, the gate will not be open tonight. Verily then, I may enter, said Kay, with no better burnisher of swords than I. This I will tell Groac'h the giant, and I will bring thee his answer. Bid the man come before me, said Groac'h, when the porter had told his tale, for my sword stands much need of polish. Bid the man come before me, when the porter had told his tale, for my sword stands much need of polishing. So Kay passed in, and saluted Groac'h the giant. It is true what I hear of, thou canst burnish swords. It is true, answered Kay, and then the sword of Groac'h was brought to him. Shall I burnish it white or blue? Said Kay, taking the whetstone from under his arm. As thou wilt, answered the giant. And speedily Kay polished half the sword, and the giant marveled at his skill, and said, It is wonder that such a man as thou shouldst be without a companion. I have a companion, noble sir, but he has no skill in this art. What is his name? Asked the giant. Let the porter go forth, and I will tell him how he may know him. The head of his lance will leave its shaft, and draw blood from the wind, and descend upon the shaft again. So the porter opened the gate, and Bedwyr entered. Now there was much talk amongst those who remained without the gate that opened upon Bedwyr. Goreu, the son of Cussland, prevailed with the porter. And when he and his companions got in also, they hid themselves. By this time the whole of the sword was polished, and Kay gave it to the hands of Genor the giant, who felt it, and said, Thy work is good. I am content. Then said Kay, It is thy scabbard that hath rusted the sword. Give it to me that I may take out the wooden sides and put in new ones. And he took the scabbard in one hand and the sword in the other, and came with the scabbard. And he took the side... Yeah. Speaking I'm not doing right now. And he took the scabbard in one hand and the sword in the other, and came and stood behind the giant, as if he would have been sheathed the sword in the scabbard. But with it he struck the blow to the head of the giant, and rolled from its body. And they despoiled the castle of its gold and jewels, and returned, bearing the sword of the giant, to Arthur's court. They told Arthur how they had sped, and they took all counsel together, and agreed that they must set out on the quest of Mabon, the son of Modron, and Gilor, who knew the languages of beasts and of birds, went with them. So they journeyed until they came to the nest of Elsel, and Groac'h spoke to her. Tell me what thou knowest aught of Mabon the son of Modron, who will be taken when 3 nights old from between his mother and the wall. And they also answered, When I first came here, I was a young bird, and there was a smith's anvil in this place. But from that time no work has been done upon it, save that every evening I have pecked at it, until there is now not much more the size of a nut remaining thereof. Yet all this time I've never once heard of a man you name. Still, there's a race of beasts older than I, and I will guide you to them. So the also flew before them, and they reached the stag of Redner. And they inquired of the stag whether he knew aught of Mabon, and he shook his head.
When I first came hither, he said, the plain was bare, save for one oak sapling, which grew up to be an oak with 100 branches, and all that is left of that oak is a withered stump. But never once have I heard the man you name. Nevertheless, as you are Arthur's men, I will guide you to a place where there is an animal older than I.
And the stag ran before them till he reached the owl carrying Calvin. But when they inquired of the owl if he knew aught of Mabon, he shook his head.
When come first hither, he said, the valley was a wooded glen, then a race of men came and rooted it all up. After that there grew a second wood, and then a third, which you see. Look at my wings also, are they not withered stumps? Yet until today I have never heard of the man you name. Yet still I will guide you to the oldest animal in the world, and the one that has traveled the most, the eagle of Gwern Abbey. And he flew before them as fast as his old wings would carry him, till he reached the eagle of Gwern Abbey. But then they inquired of the eagle whether he knew not Mabon, and he shook his head.
When I first came hither, said the eagle, there was a rock here, and every evening I pecked at the stars from the top of it. Now behold, it is not a living span high. But only once have I heard the name of the man, and that was I went in search of food as far as Woo and swooped down upon a salmon and struck my claws into him. But when he drew me down under the water, I scarcely could escape from him. Then I summoned my kindred to destroy him, and he made peace with me, and I took 50 fish. But I took 50 fish spears from my back. Unless he may know something of the man whom I seek, I cannot tell who may. But I will guide you to the place where he is. So they followed the eagle, who flew before them. Though so high, since he was in the sky, it was often hard to mark his flight. At length he stopped above a deep pool in a river. Salmon of Leo, come to thee with an embassy from Arthur to inquire if thou knowest aught concerning Mabon, the son of Modron. And the salmon answered,
As much as I know I will tell thee. With every tide I go up the river until I reach the walls of Gloucestershire. There I have found such strong I've never found elsewhere. And on that you may see what is true. I say to you, let the two of you go near on my shoulders.
So Kay and Ware went on the shoulders of the salmon, and were carried up the walls of the prison, from which proceeded the sound of great weeping. Who is at the laments in this house of stone?
It is I, Mabon, the son of Modron.
Will silver or gold buy thy freedom, or only battle and fighting? Asked again. By fighting alone shall I be set free, said Mabon. Then they sent a messenger to Arthur to tell him that Mabon was found, and he brought all his warriors to the castle of Gloucestershire, and fell fiercely upon it, while Kay and Bedwar went on the shoulders of the salmon to the gate of the dungeon, and broke it down, and carried away Mabon. And now being free, he returned home with Arthur. After this, on a certain day, as Gedwar was walking across a mountain, he heard a grievous cry, and he hastened towards it. In a little valley, he saw the heather burning, and fire spreading fast towards an anthill, and on the ants were hurrying to and fro, and not knowing where to go. And Gedwar had pity on them, and put out the fire. And in gratitude, the ants brought him the 9 bushels of flax seeds, which the Sped and Penquar had required of Gilsh. And many of the other marvels were done likewise by Arthur and his knights, and at last it came to the fight with Terror the boar, to obtain the comb and the scissors and razor that lay between his ears. But hard was the boar to catch, and fiercely did they fight when Arthur's men gave him battle, so that many of them were slain. Up and down the country went Terror the boar, and Arthur followed after him until they came to the Severn Sea. There 3 knights caught his feet unawares and plunged him into the water, while one snatched the razor from him, and another seized the scissors. But before they had laid hold of the comb, he had shaken them all off, and neither man nor horse nor dog could reach him till he came to Cornwall, whither Arthur had sworn he should not go. There Arthur followed him, and after his and with his knights, and if it had been hard to win the razor and scissors, the struggle for the comb was fiercer still. Often it seemed as if the boar would be the victor, but at length Arthur prevailed, and the boar was driven into the sea, and whether he was drowned or whence he went, no man knows to this day. In the end all the marvels were done, and Kilwich set forward with him Guru, the son of Kynaston, to Yspadden and Penquar, bearing in their hands the razor, the scissors, and the comb. Yspadden and Penquar was shaved by Cobb. "Is that out of mine now?" asked Kilwich. "She is thine," answered Yspadden, "but it is Arthur and none other who has won thee for her. With my own free will thou shouldst never have had her, but now I must lose my life." And as he spake, Guru, the son of Kynaston, cut off his head, as it was ordained, and Arthur's hosts returned, each man to his own country. Well, that's really cutting a series of quests short. But the story is done. The book is over. So now we need to find someone to raid. Who all is on? I see Chiva, I see Dusk, I see Nomads, Mythic Duo, who is also playing with Dusk, so they're sharing. Library Fairy is on. Django. What is Magical doing? Magical is reading. Still in The Witcher Sword of Destiny. So, do we do more reading? Do we watch Dusk get scared playing Ghost Hunter? Or you'll watch some Elden Ring? Anyone? Anyone? Try. So, Dusk, Jiva, or Magical. Uno, dos, tres. In the meantime, oh, wrong message. Raid -F. Raid -S.
pick whichever one applies to your personal situation. And, well, let's go and read Dusk. So I hope everyone has a good evening, a wonderful weekend, and I will hopefully see some, if not all of you, for Baldur's Gate on Monday. Have a good night.
In the hollow of the night, shadows weave and twist. The wolf has told his stories, wrapped in mystic mist. Lurking in the silence where the echoes softly play. The echoes of forgotten tales, dimming as they sway. The hours drip like candle wax, slowly melting gold. Lands of frost and twilight, secrets yet untold. The forest breeze a shiver, its ancient heartbeats thrum. Underneath the silver glow, the wild whispers come. Time to close the book, let the pages fall. You've roamed the winding paths, now heed the twilight.